This is the Saturday Morning Special from Slasher Sports.
Saturday Morning Special is here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Slasher U, a college football podcast from Slasher Sports. And what a Saturday we have for you. I've been looking forward to this Saturday for a very long time, since last Saturday. Steve, welcome in. Happy Saturday to you. It's going to be a great day of college football.
It always is. I mean, a lot of people have been kind of like, there's not really a lot of really exciting games. There's a couple of rivalry things, but you look through the schedule. Virtually every game being played is going to have some kind of impact on a conference standings. So let's get at it.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel too. When you look at the slate, and especially when you look at the Saturday six pack we're getting into, we have some really important games, especially within the Big Ten, within the SEC. And then you can, there's a good game in the Big 12 too, a couple in the Big 12, which is a conference that you and I have really been advocating as being the deepest conference in all of college football. There's a lot to get into today in our Saturday six pack. We're also going to give you a great misfit game from each of us. And then we have a new segment where we're going to put a fork in possibly 7 teams and their bowl hopes on this season. And then, of course, if you're with us, feel free to give us some questions, comments. We will get them throughout the show. And at the very end, at the very least. So stick with us and give us some comments throughout the show. We'd love to engage with you. That's exactly why we're here for this power hour, to get you ready for the show. While we have you, before we get started, please, if you are watching on YouTube, give us a like, comment, subscribe. We have seen some great engagement with our listener, calling it a project very soon, Steve, because we are really a lot of really fun things that we're getting into so far here. So thank you so much for joining the journey with us, and we're just getting started. So Steve, are you ready to dig into this Saturday six pack?
I indeed am. Let me see if I got my church key here. Yeah, I got it. All right, so let's go.
All right, sounds good. So with the first game on the Saturday six pack, it's the big noon Saturday game. It's Ohio State versus Penn State. And I know you absolutely love both of these teams, Steve. So Ohio State versus Penn State, initially right off the bat, we've talked about this at the beginning of the week. This is an opportunity for us to see what Ohio State really has going for them. They're actually going to play a team that could give them some competition. We haven't really seen that. We thought we might see that with Iowa last week. That was not the case. Will Penn State be the case, or will we see a Penn State Nittany Lion team that showed up against the Michigan Wolverines? Steve, what's your thoughts?
I think this is Michigan 2.0, honestly. It's something. And again, my disdain for the Penn State athletic department and programs has been well documented on our Slasher U podcast here.
You don't say.
I know, but I mean, one number jumps out at me, and that's 347. That's how many points Ohio State has already put up this season. And yes, have they played a softer schedule? Yes, they have. But ultimately, you have to win the game on the field. You got to play the opponents you have scheduled. And when they do, there's not much doubt when Ohio State's, kicking off on Saturday that they're going to put a thumping on somebody. Now, I will say that the Penn State defense, I think, matches up better and causes some matchup problems more than any other team that they have faced. And Iowa's got a nationally ranked and an elite defense. Penn State is athletic. Penn State can run with and keep up with Ohio State, in the secondary. Their two safeties are just terrific. And I think they potentially could force some turnovers. But C.J. Stroud is going to have opportunities to be patient in the pocket. and force the ball. I shouldn't say force the ball, and work the ball downfield, because Penn State does not really have a terrific pass rush. So for me, as well as the defense potentially could keep Ohio State in check, I don't think that there's a defense anywhere, including maybe some of the bottom feeding NFL teams, that are going to be able to keep Ohio State off of the scoreboard. So I think that this is going to be a very long afternoon for Penn State fans.
Yeah,
And
there's
I'm not saying it to be mean. I'm saying it. Ohio State is just this good.
Hey, I mean, bring it on. I want to hear your take on this one. Ohio State is, in my mind, the best offense in college football. I don't know if there's an argument there. I mean, you might be able to find one with a Bama or a Tennessee or Georgia, but I just can't see it. I think Ohio State is the best offense, and although I am doubtful or a little skeptical to give them as the best team in the country right now overall, because they haven't really played anyone, I'm gonna be able to change my thought process on that after the game this week, and we're definitely gonna be talking about that this week on our thought process. Now, when we look at the over under, Ohio State is a 15.5 point favorite. Now, this is like one of those really, you talk about the sweet spots where you talk about like within the 2 touchdown line. This is over that 2 touchdown line, 15.5. Does this become a 3-score game? That's really what you have to ask yourself this question. I'm not sure. Although Ohio State has a very good offense, we have seen signs of hope for Penn State. With the exception of the Michigan game, which is what we are expecting this might to be, 15.5 points is still a lot for a team that looked really good against Minnesota last week. Over under 60.5 as well. I'm not sure if I can give Ohio State 15.5 points, Steve. I might have to lean towards Penn State with the points.
Oh, no, I mean, and I was going to mention, we're going to be talking about Florida, Georgia later, and the line in that game is 22.5 the last time I saw.
Mm-hmm.
I think Florida would beat Penn State. I mean, Penn State has proven that they cannot keep up with top 10 ranked opponents. And this has been not just this season over the thing. And then plus Ohio State, they have the number 2 defense in the country. Again, playing against softer competition. Okay, I'll grant you that. But again, they still have to execute the game plans and shut things down. So for me, I think Ohio State covers. I think Ohio State, if everything falls into place, they could even cover the over on this game. I mean, just by themselves. I mean, that's how confident I am in this Ohio State team. I've been saying all along that Ohio State's the number 1 team in the country. That I have more doubts about Georgia than I do about Ohio State.
Yeah, you have.
But Sean, the only way that this game stays close is that Sean Clifford he's got to find his game. He really hasn't had a signature game this year. He played well against Minnesota. I think he had 4 touchdowns against Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But he hasn't shown any indication that he's going to find that magic again against an elite defense. Minnesota is one of those teams we've talked about, Kansas and some other teams that had that early flash. And I was really excited about Minnesota. If you look at that team on paper, I still get kind of excited. But, Penn State dominated them. And this isn't Minnesota. Okay, this isn't even Iowa. I mean, this is Ohio State. So I really think that this is going to be a signature moment. It's gonna have people now talking Ohio State needs to be the number 1 ranked team in the country.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that will be a conversation piece if Ohio State takes care of Penn State, very handily. Even if it's not as bad as Michigan took care of them, I think we finally are going to get the opportunity to see, is Ohio State for real? We haven't seen that with their schedule this year. This is the time. We know we're going to see Ohio State versus Michigan at the end of the year, but until then, this is the best test for the Buckeyes. CJ Stroud, obviously in Heisman contention, one of the top. A lot of people think he is right now the front runner. Another opportunity for him to really show his case. And I think, again, just like his team, this is a prime opportunity for him to really take off. We saw it with Hendon Hooker in Tennessee, where he became a front runner because of his performance against Alabama, a top team. CJ Stroud, this is his time to shine. Let's stick into the Big Ten, and let's talk about.
I wanted to ask one real quick question before we move on to
Sure.
Michigan State.
Yeah.
If Penn State has the kind of game this week that they had against Michigan, does that seat start to warm up under James Franklin?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think that we shouldn't let it go. I think there should be some concern. However, we've seen Penn State in the past, right? They go 6 games, they look real strong, and then they start struggling off the bat. If your only losses are to Michigan and Ohio State, and then you find a way to win the rest of them, I don't know if at this very moment you can give him a hot seat. I would say it starts to get warm. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to be a comfy chair for him, but I don't know just yet. Well, yeah, not sure yet on that one. I would like to say yes. I would like to say that you should really, pay attention to that. But what we've seen so far throughout the Big Ten, and he's not a terrible coach, and man, I don't know. I'd have to lean towards no right now. Until I can really dig into it more, I'd have to lean towards no. All right, Michigan State. This is another one of those great football games that we see every year, and what fun this one is. I don't know if it's going to be that fun this year. However, Michigan State usually plays well against Michigan and has Jim Harbaugh's number in the past. For some reason, Michigan's a 23-point favorite in this football game. As much as Michigan State has had their woes this year, and we've definitely tracked them throughout this show here on Slasher U, and we've definitely heard some thoughts for the Michigan State faithful. I don't think Michigan State is going to lose by 23 points to their in-state rival. I mean, we have seen some of the best games of the year in college football seasons past when in the Michigan versus Michigan State football game. I don't know if Michigan State can get it done against this Michigan team. I think this Michigan team is a very special one, but by no means do I think they lose by over 3 scores, Steve.
The only way that Michigan State stays in this game and covers the spread is if Tom Izzo is invited into the locker room. He somehow converts his 2-3 zone schemes into a defensive scheme that can slow Michigan down. That's the only way that this game stays this close.
We already are hated by Michigan State fans here, and you're just making it worse.
Well, those Mel Turner lovers. This is the Mel Turner Bowl, Michigan State. Now we have now renamed it. Forget the Paul Bunyan Trophy. This is the Mel Turner Bowl. And in case you were wondering what we're talking about, we made a mistake of calling Mel Tucker Mel Turner, but it could be.
Gave us 100 comments on this page. Right
but you know what? It might as well be melatonin because it really doesn't matter. Okay. Mel Tucker's mercenary approach at Michigan State is kind of catching up with them here this year. Now, I'm not saying that next year, especially if they can capitalize on the transfer portal, that Michigan State can't try to right the ship a little bit. But I think Michigan State's coming back more to the pack, and we're having, really just 2 elite teams in the Big Ten, and Penn State's kind of like in the hunt, kind of there. I think Illinois has certainly been a great story, but Michigan State's coming back to the pack a little bit, and this is just not a good matchup. It's not a good matchup on paper. It's not a good matchup timing wise. It's Michigan can run the ball with anybody.
Yeah, no, they definitely can. And when you look at this Michigan State offense, I really thought that it was going to be a lot better this year. I mean, when we talked about the preseason, when we talked about the thoughts on this conference, I mean, obviously I had high hopes for Michigan State after what we saw last year. Peyton Thorne has not done that. I mean, his last name is exactly what it is. It's been a thorn in the side of the Spartans for the entire season. And we thought we were going to have this amazing running game with Michigan State. And Berger and company has just not done that. And I don't know if it's all his fault. I think there's obviously some awesome offensive line woes. And then the defense, especially the secondary, has been an absolute nightmare for this team. I still don't think they lose by that much. It could be close. But if I'm playing this bet, I'm going to take Michigan State with the points. I think Michigan takes care of it handily. JJ McCarthy, another one of these games for them that we can decide and see, can he manage the game? We saw him against Iowa. A lot of people had questions. Can he handle that defense and take care of it? He did. I don't think this Michigan State defense is even remotely close to an Iowa defense. If he can handle it, if he can get the run game going, Blake Corum, obviously a Heisman hopeful. I think Michigan takes care of this. Harbaugh finally gets some nice recognition, some nice respect against Michigan State. They moved to 8-0. That's my thoughts on this one. And then we get another thought process here. If we have an Ohio State win and a Michigan win, do we just get to keep building that momentum about maybe 2 battles of the unbeatens at the end of the year? And then really, honestly, I'm taking that to be the winner of that goes to the college football playoffs to represent the Big Ten.
The only thing that concerns me in this game, as far as betting and the spreads go, is that Michigan's got to stop with the penalties. They are just. I don't think they're the most penalized team in FBS, but they've got to be close. I mean, they just got to stop making, and a lot of them are foolish penalties. Yeah. So from that standpoint, I can see, because it's just such a big rivalry game and everybody is so psyched, Michigan State does some yapping. Michigan State gets Michigan to be too emotional in this, and those penalties end up stalling drives or giving Michigan State opportunities for some easy points. But I'm again calling Tom Izzo. Please report to the stadium. You're the only hope for the Spartans this week.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, we saw emotions rise at halftime in the tunnel between Penn State and Michigan. I'm sure emotions are going to be high between Michigan and Michigan State. We got someone joining in, Drixley, our good old friend of the show. Melatonin Bowl is better. Laugh out loud. So, I mean, that's a good one. Melatonin Bowl. Even the people commenting in are going to get us canceled by the Michigan State faithful, but that's okay. All right.
Good to hear from you, Drixley.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining in. And as you can see, if you're commenting and if you're watching, I do see we have a pretty decent amount of people watching today. So thank you so much for chiming in and watching us here on the Saturday Morning Special. If you have anything you'd like to say, comments, questions, even if it's not a game we're covering at the moment, we can get to it. And we always leave room at the end for listener questions. So thank you so much. All right, let's head into the conference that, Steve, you and I have been really excited about all season. I still believe it. I think I'm going to believe it probably for the entire year. This is the deepest conference in all of college football. It's the Big 12. That's what I'm talking about. And with this one, we got the Pokes versus Kansas State, Oklahoma State versus Kansas State. This is going to be a good football game in my mind. I want to know, honestly, we look at this first and foremost, we look at TCU, who is the only undefeated team left in the Big 12. These are the other 2 teams here that probably will be in the running for the Big 12 championship. I mean, honestly, this division is still wide open for, I think everybody to be in the Big 12 championship, with the exception of maybe a few on the bottom. But okay, regardless, this is going to be a really good football game. We've seen what Sanders can do at the quarterback position. We don't know what's going on with Adrian Martinez with Kansas State. Is he healthy? Is he going to be completely 100%? Is he even going to play? I like Oklahoma State in this football game just because of what I've seen in the past from Oklahoma State. They are technically a 1.5 point underdog. I mean, but if you have anything within 3, it's basically playing the money line, right? So just pick your spread, how you feel. Plus 1.5, you might as well, if you want Oklahoma State to win, you might as well play them on the money line. Your odds be a little better. That's what I would play in this case. I like the Pokes. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I'm leaning to Oklahoma State here as well. I mean, Spencer Sanders has had a special season. He really has. And the fact that there's still uncertainty on the Kansas State side at quarterback, even if Adrian Martinez would start, by all reports, he's pretty banged up. So how effective will he be? Oklahoma State's defense, if they can force some turnovers early, I think that would give them an early cushion and they can kind of cruise a little bit. I do worry about the Cowboys defense. especially rushing. I mean, they gave up 224 yards to TCU. Earlier in the year, they gave up over 200 to Texas. That could put them in a precarious situation. If Kansas State turns to the running game, that could potentially keep this game really, really close. I'm sure that speaks volumes as to why Oklahoma State comes in as the underdog as opposed to being the favorite in this game. And it seems so weird not to focus so much with Oklahoma State on offense. I've been talking defense here, and what they potentially could do. They have been great stopping teams on third down. That it ideally could be the deciding factor, I think, in Oklahoma State's favor. And it's, it's really weird to me why the line is there too, because I believe Kansas State's lost 3 straight home games.
Yeah, when I look at this football game, the biggest things that stick out to me is the yards against of Oklahoma State, for sure. I mean, they are allowing over 450 yards per game. Kansas State obviously has looked good rushing. Adrian Martinez is a big part of that, though. Now, don't get me wrong, Vaughn is a very good running back for Kansas State, but
Yes.
when you have Adrian Martinez in, he is a dual threat quarterback. They don't get that with their backup. That's just not something they get with Kansas State. Rightfully so. Adrian Martinez is one of those generational talents that they brought over in the transfer process. I really hope that he's 100% he can go in this one, because I think there's an opportunity for this to be one of those fantastic football games. Kansas State doesn't score as much points offensively, even when Adrian Martinez is in the mix, compared to Oklahoma State. So Kansas State is going to have to rely on their defense a little more. Oklahoma State, even though they do allow a lot of yards, their offensive production is super high. Even with the fact that you said Kansas State, lost a decent amount of home games this year, and they are 5-2 on the year. I just lean towards Oklahoma State in this one because of how productive their offense is. I mean, Sanders has been banged up as well, too. We should probably keep that in mind. I mean, both of these quarterbacks are probably not going to be 100%. Sanders, obviously, I think is a little more healthy right now, but we are getting to the point in the season. I mean, we're in week 9, Steve. I don't think anybody's 100%.
Right.
Everybody's pretty banged up, right? Spencer Sanders has already thrown for 2,000 yards this year, 15 touchdowns. He's got 4 picks. I mean, when you look at the stat line of Adrian Martinez, if you didn't know the full story, he hasn't even thrown for 1,000 yards yet. But as I said, he's a dual threat quarterback. He's done a lot of great things for this team. He is the reason that they are in the contention in the running and being 5-2 and have the opportunity to seal themselves a bowl after this game. Still leaning towards the Pokes, though. I think I'll take them on the small spread here at a -1.5 underline. Over-unders 56. I'm taking the over in this one, even though I do think Kansas State defense is pretty decent. Oklahoma State it has a high-powered offense. They can score, and then I'm not too thrilled about their defense. So I think 56 points is pretty easy between these two teams, Steve.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, and I'm glad you mentioned Deuce Vaughn, because he is great at finding holes that maybe aren't there. If you're watching the game, from a fan's perspective on TV, oh wow, how did he find that hole? He just seems to have a knack for that. Mm-hmm. If he can break a couple of big runs, I mean, that takes a lot of pressure off the Kansas State offense, and then by default, the Kansas State defense as well. So, I think I would have to go with the over here, but I wouldn't bet that with confidence. This is going to be one of those rare Big 12 games that really defense could rule the day. And neither of these defenses would jump out at you as being an elite defense, but
no.
Circumstances could actually turn this into more of a defensive contest than we would be used to.
If we have a defensive battle to the point where we have like the score is an under, and we're talking like field goals are the reason that we win this football game, like kind of like a Big Ten or a Maction kind of style. Well, I shouldn't say Maction because there's no Mac or defense in Mac. But if it's a Big Ten kind of style football game, I'd be completely shocked. But there is an opportunity that the defensive reasons win the game for one of these teams. In my mind, I think it's Oklahoma State Cowboys. All right, let's head to the SEC. I know everyone's favorite conference here in college football. when we're listening here on Slasher U. Again, thank you so much as we're halfway through the Saturday six pack. If you are listening on YouTube, please give us a like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening later on the podcast feeds, thank you so much. And if you're hearing anywhere else, go ahead, comment, listen where you're listening in from, what team you're rooting for, and we'd love to hear from you. We go into Kentucky versus Tennessee here, Steve, and this is the first task we get to see from the Volunteers since the win against Alabama. Obviously, they played UT Tennessee or Martin last week. That's not obviously that's like a cupcake, right? Thank you so much for beating Alabama. We'll give you an opportunity to put your goalpost up. You go ahead and play. You go ahead and play the UT Martin until we come back. So this is gonna be a good football game. Kentucky versus Tennessee. Tennessee is a 12-point favorite in this one, and I think that's pretty high. And I do have faith in Tennessee. I was one who really thought that Tennessee could beat Alabama. We have that well documented. However, when I look at this football game, I do think Tennessee wins this game right off the bat. But we have seen a Kentucky team who has looked dreadful and who has looked pretty dang good. And it has revolved around one person, and that is Will Levis. We have seen when Will Levis is not in there, their team crumbles. We have seen fumbles. We have seen reverses gone bad. We've seen the offensive line begin to diminish. And then the defensive side just doesn't fire on all cylinders. I do think there's still some of those concerns on that Kentucky football squad, even with Levis in. Levis is really showing his reasons in my mind to be one of the top quarterbacks taken in the NFL draft, because when he just shows right there that he is an absolute game changer for a squad, even with all the woes and concerns for a football team. I think he makes this one close, but I don't think he's going to be enough for this team for Tennessee and this high-powered offense with Hendon Hooker. Talk about Will Levis and being one of those quarterbacks we're going to be talking about probably for the next decade on the professional level. Hendon Hooker is one of the most exciting talents that I've seen in college football in a very long time. It's crazy. I mean, could you imagine if he's still with Virginia Tech this year? Who knows what would happen, what kind of season he'd be having right now. Putting him in a high-powered offense with those receivers at Tennessee has been absolutely one of the most fun storylines in all of college football this year. I'm taking Tennessee to win this football game. I'm a little skeptical about 12 points, though, Steve.
I've really been on the fence about this game all week, and you made a great point earlier about how Kentucky has kind of let us down at times, and at inopportune times where they really could have made a statement. The offensive line of Kentucky really worries me. Yes, there have been injuries, but I mean, Levis has been running for his life most of the season, and Chris Rodriguez, since he's returned, he's a bruising running back, and I really, really like him. I thought when he came back, that's when Kentucky would really take off, but he can't do it solely on his own. I mean, and he has to be able to grind out some yards, to have Kentucky stay in this game. Now, the bad news for Wildcat fans is that Tennessee is only giving up, I think, 91 yards a game rushing.
Right. But they are giving up a pretty decent amount passing. Now, obviously, I'm sure that's a little saturated with that, back and forth shootout between Alabama, but overall, they are giving up almost 330 yards per game.
Right, and certainly when you have Levis and the receivers that he has to work with, you could see them, giving up some big plays and allowing Kentucky to stay in the game. But again, I think momentums is something that you can't put a stat line on. I think Tennessee is just on a roll. It was a good thing for them, I believe, to have played more of a local rivalry game by playing UT Martin after Alabama. I'm sure that game was scheduled purposely to follow the Alabama game to kind of let things settle a little bit. I wonder if Tennessee is going to use their running backs Jabari Small and Jalen Wright, if they're going to use them as a weapon to keep the Kentucky defense, which is a physical defense, kind of keep the Kentucky defense, off balance a little bit. They have the ability to break big runs. Everything for me, as excited as I am, and as much as I like individual players on this Kentucky roster, and I like the physical way they play defense, I really think this could be another game that we're excited about, but come the late in the third quarter, fourth quarter, it's going to start to turn into a blowout.
Yeah, I can see it completely that happening. When you look at a team like Tennessee, who is averaging over 50 points a game in all their football games this year, and then against a team like Kentucky, who we have mentioned that has had some defensive woes, some offensive line struggles, I do think Kentucky can get the job done. I think there is an opportunity for the upset. I'm not really confident whatsoever. I do think there is an opportunity, though. We are playing in the SEC. And what the SEC, there always is an opportunity. I think Will Levis in the passing game will have some strong opportunities to put some numbers up. But overall, when you look at this over under 61, I'm slamming the over on this football game because Tennessee has averaged 50 points a game. And I think, you would take the counter off. I think Kentucky can get 11 points, with the balance off. So I think the over is pretty easy on this game. I'm going to lean towards Tennessee to cover the 12 points. Not super confident, but Tennessee gets the job done. If I was going to lock anything, I'd take Tennessee on the money line with the over, Steve.
I think I'm going to go that route as well. I mean, I think Tennessee's for real. And it's not just the Alabama win that makes them real. I mean, they're a terrific program. They've been building, I think, to this season over the last couple. I think they've kind of been building to this where all of the pieces are in place, and we may very well be looking at Tennessee as being the SEC representative in the football playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's stick with the SEC. You talk about if you think Tennessee is for real. I know you've had your concerns in the past. Is Georgia for real? And we've seen Georgia, obviously the defending national champion. Well, we're not sure. I know, Steve, especially you are not quite sure if Georgia is for real. They go against a team of the Florida Gators, who have had probably the most up and down year in the SEC this year. Georgia is a 23.5 point favorite. Now, the line actually went more in favor than Georgia. We talked about this at the beginning of the week, and we saw the spread at 22.5. And I was already yelling, you got to slam Florida in the points on this one. 22.5, you have to, because we've seen Georgia, how they've looked against Kent State, how they looked against Mizzou, and there's an opportunity that we could see something like that happen again. I don't know if Georgia loses this football game. I think they've figured some of their stuff out, and they've definitely been adjustments, but this screams like one of those trap games for the Bulldogs, Steve.
Oh, absolutely. And I was going to save the surprise for the end. I think Florida wins this football game.
Oh, okay.
There is nothing, like if you're going to sit there and you're going to put it down on paper and you're going to add it up and have a balance sheet and everything, there is nothing that indicates that Florida beats Georgia in this game. You mentioned the inconsistencies, the up and down. Billy Napier is still rebuilding this program. And personally, I think they're at least a season ahead of what I anticipated where they would be.
That's fair.
He's a great coach. A win against Georgia at this stage of the rebuild throws open the gates, not only on the recruiting end, but for transfers and the transfer portal. And we have to start thinking of transfer portal as impactful as we have always done with recruiting classes and redshirting. I mean, this is a factor in college football now. It's all going to come down to Anthony Richardson. Just uber talented, so much fun to watch. He has to protect the football. He cannot turn it over at the rate that he has against some of the more elite opponents. So right there, you would say, well, why in the world would you think that Florida can win this game? It's Anthony Richardson. That's why I think if he has the game of his young career today, Florida beats Georgia.
This is one of those games where Anthony Richardson can show the scouts, the general managers, the owners, the coaches of the NFL that he's for real. We've saw his name across all the mock drafts on all the major media outlets of he could be one of the top quarterbacks taken. I know his name has dropped a little bit here in the past, but I think there's a very strong opportunity. Excuse me. Look at that. Sneezing live. I am not allergic to this game. I think that this is going to be a good football game. I'm going to pay attention to it. But you're right. I mean, Anthony Richardson has thrown for 7 picks and only 6 touchdowns. When we talk about the peaks and valleys in this team, Anthony Richardson is a prime part of it. Although we think that he's probably the best player on this squad and deserves to have some looks on NFL teams and being a possible first-round pick. I think he actually will be a first-round pick. It's just there's a lot of thought process there. There is a prime opportunity that Florida can win this football game if Anthony Richardson shows up. I agree with you. However, I just can't do it. I can't do it. I don't know if we could both take Florida and live to see the next day on on the podcast, right? So I'm going to take Georgia on this one. Again, would not be shocked to see Florida put it up here. I would love to see it. I would love to see one of these SEC teams fall and just prove that they're not completely invisible against another conference. Just not another conference, it's another SEC team, but against another non-college football caliber playoff caliber team. My word's just crazy today. Not enough coffee in the world, apparently. But I'm leaning towards Georgia here. The reason why I'm leaning overall is because even though I think Anthony Richardson's going to have a very good football game, you look at the yards allowed by Florida, it's almost 440 yards. And Georgia's averaging almost 525 yards of offensive production.
Yes. I
think that we are going to see a very high-scoring football game where we could probably see the overall in the 70s. And that's why, when you look at the over-under at 56.5, I'm very high on taking the over on this one. When you look at the 23.5 point favorite, though, by no means would I take Georgia. I've already put my bets in early in the week about taking Florida as a 22.5 point favorite. I put those bets in on Tuesday when I saw that spread, and I talked to you on the show. I said, put those in now. I was also one of those people that's like, I got to take that. I wish I would have waited because would have got an extra point. Did not see that coming whatsoever. I thought the spread was going to come down. UGA, though, is going to win this football game. Florida is not going to make it by more than 3 scores, though, Steve.
It's funny here. We're talking about lines and gambling and putting our bets in. Florida's playing with house money in this game. My guess is that Billy Napier is going to just throw caution to the wind, and they're going to come out gunning, and they're going to come out throwing. If they are successful early doing that, that could allow Florida to later in the game establish the run. Now, Georgia's defense is terrific against the run. So again, all of the things on paper and that you look at are saying there's no way Florida can win this. But again, if they can be successful early and kind of have that Bulldogs defense back on their heels a little bit, where they're now maybe focusing a little bit more on shutting down the pass, it could open up the running game that could slow things down enough where Florida can keep pace. So I'm just going with the gut here. I mean, absolutely, if you haven't already, run down to your sports book or go online, bet Florida, take the points.
For sure.
But if you can get some really nice, odds or some kind of teaser bets or something or parlays where Florida, you kind of keyed off Florida beating Georgia, it might be worth a couple of bucks trying to do that.
I'm with you. Drixie chimes in again and says, I was thinking you're going to take Georgia. So they're talking to you, Steve. Looks like I know a lot of people are going to think that this is going to be a pretty easy win for Georgia just based on what we've seen with Florida for the past few weeks. But like we said, we just saw Florida lose to LSU. LSU is one of those completely random teams, though. I mean, they could be a juggernaut. They've had peaks and valleys as well. There's an opportunity that Florida can take care of it. If you want to play a comparison game, Florida won against Mizzou by 7, right? And Georgia only won by 4. I mean, obviously this was, if you don't want to take the points, spread the difference. And really, if you got to understand what kind of games those happen. Georgia has made some adjustments. They had a pretty rough middle of the year against basically those 2 weeks, especially against Kent State and against Mizzou. They obviously took care of, they made some adjustments going in the Auburn game. Obviously, they just played Vanderbilt and just blew the brakes off them. You come into this football game against Florida, it could be a very interesting one. This is one I'm going to pay attention to. We probably talked the most about this one in all of our show because we do think there's a possibility for the upset. All right, Steve, before we dig into our misfits today, what games are you paying attention to that we haven't talked about in the Saturday Six Pack that's got your absolute attention that you're going to be paying attention to, and we'll hear from you on Twitter throughout Saturday?
Well, we need to go back to our distributor because I think we only talked about 5 games in our.
That's right. Yeah, that's why I looked at it. So we have to ask a question here because
I like the way you transitioned that way. Is what games are you looking at?
Like I said, there's not enough coffee in the world today. We can't even count the 6. So
I am really interested to see how TCU fares against West Virginia on the road. Again, I think TCU should be among the 4 teams that are considered for the college football playoff when the initial rankings or whatever you want to call it to come out. It's not going to play out that way because it never does. But I wonder, does TCU really try to put the cleats on the jugular of the Mountaineers, to say, hey, we are for real. You need to take us for real. And unfortunately, to sway voters and to sway public opinion, you kind of have to do that. West Virginia's had some pretty horrific injuries. And with Strixley, I'm excited to watch the TCU game. So am I. I mean, if I could have mortgaged my house, I would have bought a ticket to go down and see, the West Virginia game. But unfortunately, the secondary market prices on this game, because TCU is such a great story now, are just way beyond, my means to go to look at that. But I want to watch this game closely because I have a feeling that TCU is going to kind of break away from its fairy tale kind of story so far this year and come out and say, we are among the 4 best teams in college football right now, and we're going to prove it to you right here on national TV. So that's the other game that I'm really taking a look at. It kind of hurts me because I sort of have a soft spot for WVU. I covered them indirectly through radio stations that were down in the Morgantown market.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of my friends are big WVU fans. Their games are on local TV all the time in all sports here in the Pittsburgh market. But I think TCU, I want to see what TCU does with West Virginia.
TCU is only a 7.5 point favorite against West Virginia. And the reason behind it is because we have seen West Virginia play some very good football this year.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back to the statement that we have made time in and time out on this show for the entire year, the Big 12 is a crapshoot. I mean, it is very unpredictable this season from the top to the bottom. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had TCU at the bottom in my preseason predictions. I did not have them having this crazy season. Sonny Dykes has really took this team to, I mean, honestly, the promised land. When you look at the squad, though, could West Virginia have a game like they did against Baylor and upset the defending Big 12 champions and put TCU at their first loss? It could absolutely happen.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that I think TCU is a bad football team. I think TCU deserves to have that recognition in the college football playoffs. We had talked about this on Monday when we had some scenario talks. The only way TCU is going to make the college football playoffs is if they run through the entire Big 12 gauntlet and don't have a single loss. They have to go undefeated. Right. I think they know that. If we know that, they know that. And I think that's going to make them play a different way. And this is going to be one of those great noon games on ESPN that's probably going to be on one of my screens. There's just so many good games this week. But with TCU, the Max Duggan story is absolutely amazing. It's one of the greatest stories. I mean, starting off as a backup and turning into, having stat lines and having record book numbers that only RG3 can compare to in Big 12 history. Pretty impressive when you put yourself in that category in college football history. And then Quentin Johnston, I think, has been one of the most entertaining wide receivers in all of college football. He is very fun to watch. That guy catches everything. So I am really excited for this football game. I think TCU can take care of the 7.5-point spread. I'm not playing it because I don't know. West Virginia is just so damn unpredictable. Really is so unpredictable. So I'm just really interested in this football game. I'm taking TCU. Got another question for you. Have you ever witnessed the famed couch burnings? That must be a West Virginia question.
I have. And it still amazes me. Well, first of all, this has been going on for decades now. So how is it that the Morgantown and University police departments aren't already staked out to stop it? It's a tradition that's embraced, as dangerous as it is. It's embraced, but yeah, it is something to behold. I mean, I've been to several WVU games. Morgantown's not that far from Pittsburgh, even, but so I've driven through and seeing these couch burnings. It's one of the quirkiest, weirdest fan base traditions in any sport at any level. But you have to laugh. I mean, all you can do is laugh about it. I don't even know what the origin of it is. I mean, you understand, taking down goalposts or,
You
whatever it
understand
would
that?
be.
You understand taking out goalposts?
I do, running on
the
the field. Every fan wants to believe that what they do is part of their team winning. So that's why they'll wear the same jersey over and over again, or the same socks, or the same underwear, or eat the same foods. They really believe that by doing that, that's going to help their team win. And if they don't do that, it's their fault that their team got upset or that lost a game they could have won because they didn't change their underwear that day, or didn't burn their couch
if they're
after
wearing
the
the
game
same
before.
underwear. I hope
Yeah.
they burn the couch. Okay.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about that one. All right, Steve. I mean, I feel the same way about some weird, quirky traditions. I mean, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, and I don't understand the whole jumping through tables thing. I mean, I've never understood that. That's new. That's a new thing. When I used just never got it. Just never got it. It wasn't a thing back then. So, all right, you ready for our Misfit games? It's going to be Misfit games. Always a good way to end off the show, and then we got another cool little topic for you before we end off. But my Misfit game of the week, we didn't talk about the ACC at all this week, so that's where I'm going to throw mine with my Misfit game. I will say that I was tempted to talk about Syracuse and Notre Dame. I did think there was an opportunity to talk about that football game, but they don't qualify for Misfit. Syracuse is still ranked. So I do think that football game could be good. Syracuse, will there be an upset? Will Notre Dame come back? Who knows? That's the best we're getting with that one. But the Misfit game I'm talking about today is Miami versus UVA. I think this game is going to be one of those interesting games. It could be one that the sicko committees pay attention to. That's how bad this one could be as well. But two teams, 3-4, two teams that are struggling, two teams that we did not think would struggle this bad this year. We look at brand new coach for UVA who's had offensive woes, a offensive coordinator from Clemson coming in the coach UVA who had a great offense last year under Armstrong and company. And then they have some issues on the offensive side. And then when you look at Cristobal in Miami, we knew there was going to be some growing pains. I just didn't know it was going to be this bad. There's obviously a quarterback controversy in Miami as well. There is a lot of things to unpack with this football game. I'm not going to dig into all of them because we don't have an entire hour to talk about it, because I really do think we could discuss this entire game for an hour. I just don't know if we want to. ESPN 3:12:30 for this game. Miami's a 3-point favorite on the road against UVA. I want to see what happens with Van Dyke for the rest of the year. That's a storyline that I want to pay attention to, because he's been rocky. He's been shaky. He's been rocky. I wonder if how long Cristobal keeps him in and continues it off. He's had some really good games. He's had some games where we've really thrown question marks. But overall, Miami has found a way to still almost get 450 yards of offensive production. But when you look at the record, they're 3-4. I think this is one of those games for each of these teams today. The winner will find themselves in a bowl game. The loser probably doesn't find themselves. 4-4 looks a lot better than 3-5 when we're heading into week 10 of the season. So I'm leaning towards Miami to figure it out and take care of it. Really makes you wonder, though. First-year coaches. This is the battle of first-year coaches. When you have a big expectation in the ACC and you sit at 3-5 after head into week 10 in your first year, does the seat get warm that fast? I don't know I don't know if that's really the case, but I'm sure that there's a few fans that are already asking for them to leave and get out the door.
Well, you're always going to have that. I would think that the seat would be warmer at Charlottesville than it would be for Cristobal in Miami. That's not to say that either coach should be in danger. Okay,
right.
They are coming in and they are putting their stamps and they're establishing the boundaries and the guidelines for what they see for both of these programs going forward. I don't know that Virginia gets a bowl even if they beat Miami. I want to say they're too boring, but they're not an exciting brand of football, really, especially because they're struggling on the offensive side. But I think for Virginia fans, I think it does give you that booster going into, I'm not talking about money booster, but that confidence booster going into next season and going into spring practices. Hey, I can see where that's going. Down deep, I think Cristobal, you always want to win every week, but I think down deep, Cristobal is okay with the fact that Miami did not match early all of the wild expectations, I think, and not just in their fan base, but I think people and writers that cover the ACC, I think they really put the Hurricanes on a pedestal that they maybe really hadn't earned yet. Certainly, Cristobal, he just signed another big 5-star recruit yesterday. I think they announced it. Miami is going to be a problem in the ACC for a lot of years to come. I think Clemson knows down deep that this might be their last great shot at being,
really
the big team on campus. That they're going to now start having to deal with a Miami program that's on the rise and that has the talent in place. They're young. They've had some big moments this year already. So I really think, it's the decline of the Clemson Empire and the rise of the Hurricanes again. I as early as next year, in all honesty, I think it's probably more 2024. But Miami is going to be the new dominating force in the ACC. And I think for them to make a bowl and then have a great performance in a bowl game, that's going to do so much for this program and have so many more eyes stay focused. Because I think some people are kind of like, well, yeah, Miami, there was the hype, and is Cristobal all this? You're already starting to hear those stories, as you go and your research or you're looking to see, who you want to bet on any given week. You're already hearing those narratives. But I think Miami, this is a chance for Miami to solidify that bowl bid. And I think Miami is a team you can watch this game and see why they're going to be so good in the years to come.
I didn't expect that to take the turn where you said the Clemson dynasty is about to end. I'm interested in that. We're gonna have to dig more into that here in the future because I'm actually really interested to hear your thoughts on that one. All right, what's your misfit game of the week? I know we usually head to the FCS when we get to your thoughts.
And I'm staying right there. We're going chalk. We're going FCS. We're going with 2 ranked teams. The number 2 team in the nation in FCS, with all the upheaval that has happened over the last couple of weeks, is Sacramento State, out of the Big Sky. We think of the Big Sky as being, if not the preeminent conference in the FCS, certainly within the top 2. Watching them the past 2 weeks, I mean, I can see them running the table the rest of the year and winning the FCS championship.
Wow.
They're not flashy. Their quarterbacks. It's an interesting mix there. Their senior quarterback really relies on the short passing game, getting the ball out to backs, short sideline passes to the receivers to help control the ball. But they also have a sophomore quarterback in Asher O'Hara that's more of a running quarterback, and that's how he gets things done, on the ground is with his legs. They need to control time of possession in order to win football games. And the big challenge with them facing Idaho is Idaho leads the FCS in time of possession. So these are 2 teams that are literally having to take their best attributes and beat their opponent who has the same attributes. So it's a fascinating game. Idaho had a huge win in Missoula against then number 2 or number 3, depending on the poll you were looking at, Montana.
You had to bring it up.
Yeah, well, and Montana lost last week. Some controversy there.
Mm-hmm.
There was a blown call that allowed the game to go to overtime to allow Sacramento State to really force its will in overtime in order to beat Montana. But that's what impressed me. They took advantage of an opportunity. You prefer it not to be because of a flag or because of a referee. You prefer it to be because something happened on the field or a turnover. But they took that opportunity. They seized it. They beat Montana. FCS, and again, I'm extremely biased. I love watching FCS football because you don't necessarily have a bunch of 5-star recruits, but you have guys that have chips on their shoulders that want to prove that they can not only play at the next level, that they've been overlooked. And sometimes it's guys that came from an FBS program coming down here, finally being given an opportunity to show what they have. The deciding factor is, will Giovanni McCray, the quarterback, actually it's McCoy now. I always get my McCrays and McCoys confused. For Idaho, if he can control the ball, he's a great game manager, and he showed that in that win over Montana. He has a nice balance of receivers and backs that he can control, that march to the sea, if you will, or march to the Big Sky in this case, not march to the sea. So it would not surprise me. Both teams are 4-0 in the Big Sky. So the winner of this game has the inside track to get that automatic conference bid. But basically, in other words, to improve their seeding, maybe get that first week bye in the playoffs. It's going to be a fascinating game. It's going to be a low-scoring game. It's going to be a more traditional football game. It's not going to be the high-power pyrotechnics. You're not going to have, the Tennessees and the Jackson State kind of offensive dynamics on display here. But it's good old-fashioned football. It's FCS football, especially for the West, for the Western schools. You have a lot more of that smash mouth going on. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's the game. The 2 games that I want to watch most are both FCS. It's Holy Cross Fordham. It's Idaho Sacramento State. And Sacramento State, if they can take care of Idaho handily, I think now you're going to start getting more votes for them to be the number 1 team in FCS, because for whatever reason, the number 2 ranked team in FCS never gets first place votes. And I don't understand. I don't get, how can that be? But it was that way when it was, when South Dakota State was number 2, it never got first place votes. It's now the number 1 team in the country. It was always the number 3 or the number 4 team that got first place votes, but not the number 2 team. But so many people view Sacramento State as the second best team, in the division, in the subdivision, that perhaps maybe they start getting a little bit of love in the coaches poll.
Well, I mean, Idaho took care of Montana, who was undefeated at one point. Now they have an opportunity to take care of Sacramento State. If you're going to pay attention to an FCS game this week, I know Jackson State Southern is a really important one to pay attention to, but this one is at 9:00 at night on Eastern on ESPN Plus, so you don't have a lot of competition. It's a good one to pay attention to. All right, Steve.
Is Jackson State playing this week? I didn't realize that.
Yes, they are. All right. Okay. All right. Before I get you out of here, let's talk about our final segment of the day. And we're going to call it Put a Fork in Them. Stick a fork in them, if you will. There are 7 teams in the FBS that have they are on their last leg, last string, if you will. They lose today. Their bowl bids are gone. Kiss them goodbye. And every single one of those 7 teams, Steve, are underdogs, rightfully so, because they are either a 1-6, 2-6 kind of football team. We look at teams like South Florida, who takes on Houston, Northwestern against Iowa. That game seems pretty dreadful. I mean, if you're sick, go ahead and watch that football game. New Mexico State taking on UMass, who's also going to be on the verge. Arkansas State's on the verge of being eliminated. They take on South Alabama. Colorado, the Power 5 team who's fired their head coach this year, they're on the verge. They take on Arizona State. San Jose State takes on Nevada. Hopefully they could knock them out. And then Wyoming takes on Hawaii. And we know all the woes about Hawaii this year. They're on the verge of taking out. I am actually, when I look at these teams, I don't have any hope for any of them except maybe UMass, because when you look at them against New Mexico State, I think that game could go either way. I think UMass might be able to stay alive. But I don't have any hopes for any of the rest of them. I think we see at least 6 teams out of those 7 get eliminated from bowl contention this week, Steve.
Yeah, I have to go there. I mean, the team I hold out hope for, I think, is Nevada. They have enough on paper that any week they can come up with an unexpected win. But I mean, really, when you look at this entire listing, I mean, Northwestern had its highest point of the season. It wasn't even on this continent. They had to go to Europe. They had to go to Ireland to have
week 0.
In week 0, it wasn't even an official week of football. We have to have a show about this week 0 thing too at some point. It has to be a topic.
Great. Week 0 was amazing.
Oh, it's great. Just call it week 1. Is it really that bad if a team doesn't start until week 2? No, it really doesn't. But anyway, I think Nevada can kind of keep their hopes alive. I think it's more of a case of keeping Nevada on life support as opposed to really establishing them getting a bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think of all the teams that we listed there, I think we're looking at forks in them. On my script, I had UCF and not USF. So at first I was excited. I'm like, I think UCF can keep things going. But we talked about them in 5 for Friday.
Right.
But USF, all the promise of that program has just come crashing down around them.
This has got to be the end of Jeff Scott, right? It's got to be. I think
it is. And the money that the university has put into that program, to have it not really pay dividends now, even at this point, that affects how you spend on coaching and what you can do on facilities and everything. So the USF story, unfortunately, I think is going to have a sadder ending than I think a lot of us had hoped for when they first really tried to make a go for it. But if I was a fan of any of these teams, I would make sure that my forks are handy, because you're probably going to have to be sticking it into your TV listing.
Yeah,
you
real
know,
quick. Yeah,
today.
it's definitely going to be one that's pretty tender for all these games. Again, I think UMass is the only one. Nevada could be good, but San Jose State's a very good football team.
But yes, no, they are. Yes.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Saturday Morning Special today. We kept you a little late. I guess we seem to be doing that lately, but that's okay. Thank you so much for joining us. I see we still have people listening and watching in, so thank you. Do appreciate that. We'll be back here again Monday morning as we get our Monday moanings because we're going to have a lot to talk about. Already have a few topics in hand. Already have a few topics in mind. As we get ready, we're going to ask some questions about, is Cincinnati for real? There's a big game coming up in Cincinnati today. And then obviously we got the Maction starting on Tuesday. So we'll give you some previews there, of course, with a couple other topics that we get to find out today that we'll build up. Join us on the Twitters. You can find me at Rowport. You can find Steve at Feckless Wonder. And of course, find us at Slasher Sports throughout all today. We're going to be on the social feeds, giving you some reports and some thoughts on the games we're watching today. I hope you have a good rest of your day. We do have one more comment here. It says, just thank you for the show. Thank you, Drixley, sticking with through us through the entire show. Have a good rest of your day, guys. We will see you back here next time.